great. Hi, everyone. So we're going to let the panel introduce themselves in a second, but just a little bit to kind of set the stage. So I'm personally very excited for this conversation. I think there's some real great discussion we can have about public and private sector collaboration. And for those who don't get the 0 to 88 miles an hour reference, to really Back to the Future, getting in that DeLorean and really being able to start thinking about how we use this in our organizations and what this can look like. So without further ado, pass it over to start talking a little bit about who you are and why deception matters to you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tony Rogers. I'm a FBI agent in the Boston office, and I actually work in counterintelligence. I'm not a cyber agent. And the reason I'm here is because we've been trying to expand some of the boundaries of how we define counterintelligence. And as with everything that we do, everything is starting to become cyber. And so in Boston and in the FBI in general, we're trying to explore ways that we can engage with the public, do more public-private collaboration, and then partner with agencies like MITRE to see if we can do kind of work for the common good and find new ways to help companies protect themselves and then help the FBI help the public, basically. So we'll get into a little more about how CI and cyber are starting to converge as we talk.
And I'm J.R. Manus. I'm from HSBC, which is based in London. As you can tell from my accent, I'm from London. No, actually, I do live in London, but I'm a former FBI agent from Boston as well. I worked with Tony. And, you know, I was aware of deception capabilities while I was working in the FBI, and it's one of the things that when I went to HSBC to lead the cyber intelligence program there, that I wanted to get our organization toward and eventually doing. And I think the 0 to 88 concept is basically to highlight the fact that you really can't start with deception. Deception is one of those things that you need to work towards. And I think we're going to be talking about some of that. I won't ruin all your questions. Right. Over to you, Stan.
I'm Dr. Stan Barr. I'm from MITRE. I've been there 27 years. I actually started MITRE's operational deception program in 2007. We called it Cactus, collecting against cyber threats in situ, so we could learn about our adversaries. I've been the capability area leader for actually doing deception for the last number of years, and now I'm actually trying to figure out how MITRE can work toward improving OT and IoT security. And so I am really excited to be here and talk about these concepts and how we can engage and do a number of different things. By the way, I didn't. That was an accidental thing. But everyone, check out MITRE Engage. We're only like 80,000 followers on LinkedIn behind attack. So tell your friends, everyone, follow MITRE Engage. Tell all your friends to follow MITRE Engage so we can catch up.
All right, and my name is Myrna Marovitz. I'm the lead for MITRE Engage and the crazy one who decided to drive this DeLorean and attempt to keep this on track. So with that, we're going to start jumping right in. And to start, I want to lay some groundwork about this area. And I want to start with Stan. Can you just define denial, deception, adversary engagement? These are terms we're sort of throwing around. What do they mean to you and sort of your vantage point on things?
Sure. So, you know, I think this is definitely the most important thing, right? So the idea of cyber denial, and wow, that is much better. I can even hear how better this is. I should just leave it on my chin like I was told. Is the idea of cyber denial is preventing your adversaries from being able to run operations. So cyber denial is about stopping operations and preventing them. Cyber deception, on the other hand, is about creating opportunities for your adversaries to operate, and when they operate in a way that is favorable to you, right? So I will say, not being a vendor, deception is not a tech stack. Deception is a mental process by which we figure out what do we want to present our adversaries so they can see things. What can we make them think by presenting them, and how do we drive what they think that they're seeing into actually doing activities that are beneficial to us. And we'll talk about that a lot more as we're going forward. It's not a tech stack, it is a way of thinking. And finally, what is adversary engagement? Adversary engagement is not hackback. We're not trying to go out there and do things like that. Adversary engagement is really about reducing the value proposition on our adversaries' cyber operations. What we want is them to not feel it's a worthwhile activity, and that's what we want to move towards. The idea of adversary engagement is about reducing that value proposition, exposing our adversaries' TTPs, and figuring out how to negate them. And so I think that's how I'll lay that out. JR?
I was just going to just clarify too, because I think there are a lot of deception vendors out there, and the deception vendors are all fine. I'm not going to promote anybody here, but they have primarily made the term deception about detection. So it's about they've defined deception as this way of put this box on your network, and you can detect when bad things happen on your network. Adversary engagement, and there is at least one vendor who's focused on adversary engagement, but adversary engagement is really in the continuum of deception at that far end before hackback, where we are actively engaging with adversaries in controlled environments to try to elicit as much of the TTPs. Now I'm repeating what you said, Stan, but I'm saying it better. I'll stop.
And not only that, I would say not only on separated networks, but the idea of some of this stuff is how do we engage with our adversaries on our production networks, right? There are two different types of activities you do on your production network versus your elicitation networks and things like that. And hopefully we'll get to some of those questions.
So one kind of last groundwork piece that I want to sort of set here, because this is something we hear all the time, and since we have Tony here with us, is this legal, right? So these guys are talking about these great concepts in deception and these things you can do on your production networks.
And if it's not, I'm walking out right now.
And if it's not...
Too late.
Yeah, so...
Sure. Yes, I did check with our FBI's Office of General Counsel, and they assured us that doing things on your own network is legal. I think the reason this came up when we were talking a couple weeks ago is DOJ came out with a new good faith policy regarding the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And what General Counsel told me is that that's really more of a clarification and it codifies what was already happening, that the DOJ is not going to prosecute companies for doing really anything on their own network, to include deception or things like that. There is an important carve-out, however, which is if you have an insider threat, if you have an employee who is engaging in malicious activity or doing things within the network, that does not cover their activity. They cannot later say, oh, I was testing our system, I was trying to red team by myself, but I didn't tell anybody. That is, they still can be prosecuted for various violations. So the things that we're doing now that we're talking about internally to your own company are fine, and it also doesn't make you you're not going to be in violation.
And to kind of build off of that for Stan and JR, and you can choose who wants to respond to this first, right? That good faith piece, there are certain things that you need to do to make sure that you have control of the situation. So just spend a second talking about some of the things that you feel organizations should be thinking about to make sure that you are acting safely and that you are going to have the outcomes you're looking for.
For us, when we run an operation, we have basically 24/7 coverage of what's happening, primarily because we want to make sure that things don't go off the rails. I think our biggest fear is, you run malware in this environment that we control, and maybe you attach yourself, the malware attaches itself to some kind of botnet, and then you become a node in an attack. That is no good. That's not what anyone should be doing for adversary engagement. It's not the kind of thing that helps anyone really learn anything, because I think there's a lot of intel about botnets. So for us, we don't actually select malware in the first place that we believe leads to that. So we will do a lot of analysis on the malware. Then we basically come up with a hypothesis of what we think might happen with this malware. And then we have controls around everything that we do in our environment that enable us, even from our cell devices, to shut the whole environment down just with a quick command if anything seems to be going haywire. So there's a lot of different triggers that we've built into our environment. I know MITRE's worked on tooling that we've utilized as well to help with those triggers. But I think that it's really important that you approach this type of activity with the right frame of mind as it relates to risk. Obviously, you wouldn't do this on your production network. If anyone is thinking about adversary engagement on your production network, that is a horrible, horrible idea. It's about creating an environment that you can completely control safely and shut down at a moment's notice. And what were you going to add to that?
So I'm going to add to this. here's, hopefully I'm not outing any vendors here or anything like that. One of the things you see when people and deception vendors often talk to you is you can put your gold image, your organization's gold image in our deception appliance, and that way any interaction that happens looks like your production network. And I think that there is a lot of value if you have had an adversary previously in your network to making sure that they think they're in your network. A very important piece is not training your adversary to hack your network, right? And so one of the things that everyone should be thinking about this in this space, if you're going to run a deception operation, and a deception operation may be as simple as a guy got a spearfish and he wants to know what it is. I'm going to take a laptop that we're going to throw away. We're going to go down to Panera and we're going to double click on that malware on the desktop and see what happens. Maybe we'll have a little PCAP collection. But you should make sure that what you provide the adversary to see are things that you want him to see, right? If you have some magic secret file that is in your gold image that no one should ever know about, make sure that doesn't go into your malware analysis machine. And so I think there are a lot of things that you can do, but it's about first, we talk about the safety controls to make sure we don't damage the internet, and there's safety controls to make sure we don't damage our own organizations. And so,
yeah, and on that point, obviously we don't use a gold image when we're running operations, but we might, oh, thanks, Marta. Trent Chin. We might try different controls that we actually have in our real environment, and we always switch it up. So adversary engagement is a way of testing your own controls, but not creating a training ground for the adversary to actually understand how to come back in and actually make their way through your various defenses.
and I can say, I'll just add one last thing. We have done a number of experiments to present certain things to our adversary, and we've actually seen them use them again. And so those were phenomenal things. When you think that they're going to take something and use it again, those are things you should mark. Those are things that you can make sure they take. You can provide them on a silver platter, and they'll take them. And if you think you know how they're going to use them, you can use those as detections later on.
Great. I mean, I think this really all goes back to what you said before about deception isn't just a tech stack, and it's a process, and it requires this sort of planning and careful thought at the beginning to make sure that you're able to drive towards your goals and make sure you're able to safely do that. So I think it's helpful discussion to help organizations think about that, because that's different than a lot of other security products. So I think it's a useful conversation. I want to pivot a little bit. So all of us are up on stage talking about deception, talking about operations. On first blush, it almost seems a little counterintuitive. Why are you talking about deception? So JR, I'm going to start with you. Why talk about it?
Well, so deception is one of those things where you kind of can't lose either way if you want to talk about it or you don't want to talk about it. For us, we want to talk about it because we want to keep engaging with adversaries and have them keep realizing that when they're in HSBC's network, they're not in a real network. So for us, it's about changing behaviors of threat actors, and this is like deception utopia here. But if we can collectively all start working towards running more and more deception operations and frustrating our threat actors, well, one, waste their time because they're spending time in an environment that's not real, which is time that they're not spending on a real victim's environment. But two, ultimately teach them that this is not the most effective way for them to collect the intelligence they want. And that's obviously a huge high bar to overcome. But that's the utopia of changing behaviors that I think we seek to achieve with adversary engagement.
So I will. MITRE has done a lot of work over the years and not wanted to acknowledge the fact that we use deception. And I would say that the reason we did that is we believed for our organization that deception provided an asymmetric advantage. If we actually ran malware on machines that looked like MITRE and we never talked about deception, our adversaries would do the same things again and again, right? So there's a value proposition in hiding the fact that you do this so that your adversary comes back and they act the same way. And by doing that, we start to have long-term patterns of behavior. And if you read a book called Cyber Denial and Deception, written by Kristen Heckman at MITRE, you will see a 2-year study of a particular actor group and how we engage with them and what we learned about them. And I think that is one reason why for so long that we did not talk about it, right? And I think that a lot of the stuff we did in deception informed MITRE ATT&CK. And so we wanted to develop those long-term models. So I think the reason why MITRE is now talking about it rather than just providing us an asymmetric advantage is to provide others an asymmetric advantage. If you want the asymmetric advantage of not having your adversary know what you can do, that is great. And having the long-term understanding of things, that's great. If you want to create uncertainty in your adversary where they say, I'll go to another bank, not HSBC, because I don't want to waste my time, that's good as well. So we try and think about that in both ways. This advantage of hiding it and not disclosing it, and disclosing it for creating fear and paranoia and uncertainty.
And I will add that we try to capture as much behavior as possible before terminating an operation. And we can take those behaviors that we observe and actually create new organizational use cases to defend our own organization. So if we see that behavior again inside HSBC, we can alert and stop that and all those sorts of things. So we're not interested in just having threat actors go, oh, HSBC, I'm done. We want to actually elicit those behaviors and then, then ultimately lead them to that path where they realize, ah, shoot, I've wasted my time. And it's fun to waste bad guys' time.
So I think we've talked a lot about now kind of some of the fundamentals, and it can seem a little bit overwhelming, and I think it's a different mindset and it's a different way of thinking about things. So let's switch to talking a little bit about how did you guys get started? And I know, Stan, you already kind of began commenting on that, but how did you get started, and what are some concrete ways that organizations can start thinking about this space? Go for it, Stan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I said, MITRE started in 2007, 2008, and we had two goals, which is how do we understand malware better, and how do we understand our actors better, right? So how do we develop and elicit TTPs? So we really started with this one idea of a laptop that looked like a MITRE laptop. Some we actually had that were acknowledged MITRE laptops. Some we had that were not acknowledged as MITRE laptops. And we literally started with a MiFi. Here is a laptop, something that SSL bumped and packet capture bumped outside, and a MiFi, and that's all we did. Double-click the malware, see what traffic goes out, see what new domains, what IP addresses, what snort rules we could develop, what we could see coming back down, and recording some things with Hostmon events over the years. We grew to pretending that we're small office. Here's what a MITRE small office in a particular part of the world, because MITRE operates worldwide. What would it look like to have a little tiny Soho with different infrastructure? And we tried different small experiments, and some of them were fine to run for 5, 10, 20 minutes. And if we got one beacon, or it ran something and tried something and that didn't work and they bugged out, that's great too, because that gives you that, don't spend 1,000,000 years building stuff. Build it incrementally and then get another piece of malware and learn a little bit more. So I think that's how we started out, and you can talk about.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'll back up for a second, because we actually had to go down this road of ensuring that we were delivering strategic intelligence to our organization. We were delivering the right tactical intelligence. So, I had to make sure that we were hunting for the right IOCs to defend the organization, utilizing the right data sets to extract that information. And we, through building that program where we felt like, okay, we are doing as much as we can in threat intel, and delivering finished intel to the whole bank, and sharing intel outside the bank, because the financial sector is very big on sharing. That was at the point where we thought, okay, what's next? We've got a whole lot of automated processes that enable us to do all the things that we know we need to do, but how do we move to that next level? And so for us, similar journey, primarily because I've known Stan a while. We started really with just a laptop, and you can start with a laptop, and you don't need to really overthink this because if you run a piece of malware, and one, you do need to have an environment that can capture all the data from that. So it doesn't really make any sense to run malware if you're not actually collecting all the logs and the PCAPs and doing man in the middle of SSL and all those sorts of things that really enable you to understand exactly what's going on. So we built an environment that enables us to do that, and then we ran malware with just one single victim machine. And I think what we learned from our first operation was that the threat actor tried to look for our Active Directory server, and we didn't have one. So the threat actor then just decided to leave. And so we then iterated. So at the end of every operation, we just think about what could we do to make it better. So then the next time we had an Active Directory server, and we held a threat actor for close to a week in our environment. And we've been doing this now for, I don't know, maybe about 18 months. And with each iteration, our environment becomes richer and richer and richer. And we think of new and different ways to try to elongate those operations and extract those, the TTPs.
Can I just chime in here? And I would say that one of the other things that we did as MITRE is this was a great opportunity back when Jared was an FBI agent. MITRE shared data and things that we had as sorry about that, outcomes. MITRE shared data and things we learned with our government partners, right? And that was an important thing for us, is to learn about these things and provide that data to someone who is able to action it through a number of different things, different activities. So that was, and sometimes they were able to tell us more. Sometimes they were like, oh, that's nice or whatever. Sometimes they were fascinated to see what we had learned that was different. And I know that we've had a number of unique things that we were able to share. And I think that from a MITRE, from a U.S. company perspective, this is an activity of learning these things and being able to share with the government to actually provide a community positive outcome. So that's one of the things we've done. Sorry to interrupt you, Miranda.
No, I think that's a perfect segue, because I was going to turn it over to Tony for a second to talk a little bit about, in the financial sector, there's pretty sharing and threat intelligence, it's more normalized, I think, than in other places. So, Tony, can you comment a little bit about sort of the relevance of counterintelligence and threat sharing and why organizations should be thinking like this?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm a counterintelligence agent, not a cyber agent. I'm going to refer to counterintelligence as CI, which I know acronyms mean different things to different people. So for us, it's obvious. Apparently, it means a lot of other things that aren't counterintelligence. And the way I found out about this is Stan Redditt and I were meeting with a company not long ago, and it turns out that when Stan asked to see the IT guy's gal and asked, "What does your gal look like?" that means global address list. It does not mean the guy's girlfriend, which is what I very logically thought. So I'm going to say CI, and I mean counterintelligence. So CI and cyber are distinct, but they overlap, like I said. And when we talk to companies, we benefit a lot from that, both as an FBI, as an agency, and then USIC, the intelligence community in general. What I mean by that is, at the local level, we often don't know that companies exist, especially in Boston and San Francisco, even more so. The startup culture and the incubation that's going on, we'd like to know what's going on in the environment, and we only can do that if companies come and talk to us and we know that you are there. So it helps us know what are the cutting edge technologies, like what's the new thing that we need to know about and protect, because someone's going to go after that. So at a basic level, we just need to know that you're there, and that's useful to us. And then as you break that down, as people start to get attacked or as things happen, that identifies for us our adversaries' gaps, their capabilities, what they can and can't do, maybe what their intentions are, things like that. And we know who's doing it, and that can fill in gaps for us that we need to know as the technology develops. And purely from counterintelligence, from a CI standpoint, we do a lot in the tech transfer and counterproliferation realm. So knowing what adversaries are after can help us in things that aren't really related directly to cyber. But this is often how we find out about that. Similarly, post-Ukraine invasion, countries like Russia that are being sanctioned, they are going to have to find other ways to get what they want. And so we're constantly trying to find out, they still need things. They need to build their weapons platforms, stuff like that. Their economy's, going to tank at some point. And we need to track how are they going to get stuff, because they still are going to try. So the old methods might not work. So a lot of the sort of the cyber world is where they might try to obtain things. And so that's where the cyber and the CI are constantly bleeding into each other. And for us as a CI group, that is often how we find out how this is working. What else do I have? I think we'll talk about what we can provide back later. Okay.
So, and I like this discussion on sharing, and I think we talked a little bit earlier around adversary engagement being this mechanism. You're never going to stop the stream of adversaries that are coming, but you might be able to have that impact to slow them down, to drive up the cost of their operations, drive down the value from those operations. And at the very beginning of sort of that larger approach with adversary engagement, or that larger goal that you're trying to kind of move towards, it starts first within an organization and then builds up to be a cross organization. So MITRE and HSBC participate in regular sharing. So can you talk a little bit about some of that value and why you're why you share this information, what value you see individual to your organizations, across organizations? And Jared, do you want to start this one off?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously the more partners you have in this space, the more information you're going to end up learning about adversaries. So, for us, we want more partners than just MITRE to be working with us on this, because we can each design our own environments, and no one's going to do their own environment the same way. And then we can detonate the same malware in our own unique environments, and then try to see what happens in one environment versus another, and why did it work better over here versus over there, which really helps evolve everyone's environment at the same time. That's one thing. I mean, the other thing is that obviously, because we don't always do joint operations, but everyone's out there running malware for different threat actors all the time, and when we kind of collectively come together to talk about the TTPs that were observed and those behaviors, those are things that organizations can actually use in their own defensive tech stacks to add in additional use cases and alerts to try to prevent that behavior on their own networks as well. What else, Dan?
I was gonna chime in about the EDR thing. So some time ago, probably 6 months ago, JR ran a piece of malware through one of their environments, and they noticed some bad behavior coming from a particular binary, and they had been running their EDR in audit mode, and it didn't pick it up. So JR actually gave us a sample within a day or two of them running it, and we tried it with a different, what we'll call it our EDR tool. That is, it's another product. I just don't want to throw any vendors under the bus here. So, so we tried it with what we were using to detect malicious events, and we also did not notice we did not get a tampering event from the process injection mechanism that they used, right? So I think we went to our EDR supplier and said, hey, this is not detecting something that. Process tampering should be something that always gets flagged. And that actually was great, because JR had something, he couldn't explain why he didn't see it, and asked us to double check those results. We double checked those results on a different EDR and came to the same conclusion, right? And so that right there is the kind of thing where you can go, can you try this yourselves? Like, did I miss something? Does my team not know how to do this? And see what's going on, and then compare and contrast those results. Because it's, even if we implemented the same type of computer with the same type of role, the EDRs might be different, or something else might be different. And you can learn so many different things from that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why. And I think it's also just community. You need to be able to have a community where you can call someone else and say, what are you seeing? We have different types of feeds, they have different types of feeds, we have different sharing things, they have different ones. So creating that fabric where we can find the people who need to know, and we can connect to people and help them know, I think is an important thing as a community, from both from the MITRE, being that honest broker, to working with corporate individuals, to working with government community people, to connect all of us up. And I think that's super important, especially to MITRE.
And because they gave me a microphone, I'm going to talk too. And I think there's another piece to the story that Stan told about the EDR operation, and that is that we were actually able to contribute back to attack with a sub-technique. And I think that's a really important piece of this, right? And I'm saying attack because as MITRE, I have to say it 20 times per presentation. It's required. Right. We were able to contribute that back to attack, which then shares it out with the community, right? And it does it in a way. Now, in this case, we are openly talking about it. There was no sort of equity here of someone not wanting to talk about it, but it allowed us to give back to the community without MITRE necessarily needing to stand up and say, here's how we did this and this is what we got, right? But the information got where it needed to go. And I think that's an important piece of this sharing of how do we not only share what we're seeing, but also sharing the outputs and what that means for the community. I want to pivot a little bit for Tony, right? So they're talking a lot about sharing within and across companies. Where does the government fit in this? When, where, why should an organization reach out to their local field office?
Sure. I'll start with the how, which is you can just call your local FBI office. And if you don't know how to do that or it's not working for some reason, you can email me, arogers@fbi.gov, and I'll figure it out. For those of you who are local, we have a local cyber agent who's in the audience, so I can connect you guys afterwards. So that's the how. The why, like I said before, the government and the FBI especially gets a lot out of the interaction. What we can provide back varies depending on what's happening. It's better if you do it early, though. We need those relationships to happen so that we know, like I said, who you are. You can get a personal relationship. We know what your company does, what your vulnerabilities are, and then if you get hit, or maybe when you get hit, we can help. What the help looks like will vary, obviously, depending on what happened. If it's a ransomware attack, if it's an insider threat, if your IP was stolen, those will have different outcomes. And the FBI, and again, I'm speaking as a CI agent, said the only humanities major in the room, but we're not going to rebuild your system if it gets cooked. We're primarily there as an outward-facing agency to kind of figure out who did it and what we can do to stop them again. So I want to manage expectations on that. But for an insider threat, we can help you on what's going on inside your company. We can help. It will depend on what happened. We can provide indicators if we know who you are, sort of as things are developing. We can share intelligence and information on what the adversaries are doing, what they might be doing next. So there is benefit to the company that we think will be, it might not be real time, but it's going to be relatively current. And it will depend on, again, what industry you're in, what you do, things like that. So we think there is value to both sides to sharing, but it has to be done before you get hit for it really to kind of work. So I would encourage you to reach out, get to know your FBI office. They have really, really good agents out there, both on cyber and CI, and they want to help you guys protect yourselves. And it can be a really productive relationship going both ways.
Yeah, when I was had my FBI hat on, I would tell companies that the FBI should be part of your incident response plan, but it shouldn't be your incident response plan. So companies need to be proactively reaching out and establishing those relationships, so that way they know who to call when there's a problem. But as Tony pointed out, the role of the FBI is not to come and rebuild your network; it's to investigate.
So I want to make sure we have time for questions from the audience, but I do have one more sort of wrap-up question for us here. And it's a two-part question, because I like multi-parts. So part one is, what would you like the audience to take away from this? If they forget everything you say, which I'm sure they won't, I'm sure they'll remember every word, but if they did, what is one thing you'd want them to take away? And then the second thing is, what is one thing you'd want them to do when they go back to their organization? So we'll do this one just sort of down the line. We'll start with Stan and work our way. So Stan, one thing you want them to take away from this conversation, and one thing you want them to do when they get back to their organizations.
Thank you. I think everyone needs to assume that you are not able to keep them out, right? I mean, it's great. It would be great if we could pretend that we could keep them out. We can no longer just act as though we're able to keep them out. Assume that they're in your network, and assume that they've been there for a while. What are you going to do? How do we act when they know? That when we find them, how do we go about finding them? So that's what I want people to start thinking. Stop with this idea that we're going to keep them out forever. You're not, right? And the second thing, I'll just hype MITRE Engage one MITRE Engage one more time when I get back. You'll see the logo. But,
I'll pay him afterwards.
MITRE Engage is MITRE's framework to help people start thinking about that. And I would like people to go home and I would like people to sort of look at MITRE Engage. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us at gage.mitre.org. And if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, blog about it, repeat it, share it. And if you do not like what you see, come and tell us. MITRE Engage is hopefully a community activity and a community-owned framework. We want to make it better. And so me and Moretta, we work at MITRE. We see we see the problems the way MITRE sees them. You guys see them differently. We interact with vendors, we interact with partners, we interact with victims, we talk to the government. We want everyone's feedback, we want to improve this, and we want to build a more secure world for the future. So check out MITRE Engage.
Yeah.
And follow us on LinkedIn.
Can you click a like button too? I don't know how this all works. I'm not a social media person.
Like and subscribe.
Subscribe. So I think one of the things that maybe we haven't made as clear as possible, but adversary engagement is not something that anyone should rush out and say, that's what I want to do right now. They should be, your organization needs to be prioritizing multi-factor authentication, patching, ensuring you're stopping phishing emails, like all of the basics, right? If you've got all the basics in your defense in depth model going and they're going well, adversary engagement, especially with your intel teams, is one of those things that you can look to try to come up with ways to improve detections and start adding more to your defense in depth model. But I think it's I guess the other piece of caution, and I think we said this once before. Don't run malware on your production network. Like this, that is not at all what we're saying here. We are talking about completely separate environments that you control. These are not really the great takeaways. These are the risks. Just pointing out the risks. And frankly, you really need to think through the risks. There is a high technical bar to running adversary engagement operations. So make sure you've got the right technical personnel who can reverse malware and actually come up with a real good hypothesis of what likely will happen. That initial piece of malware is going to lead to a second stage, to a third stage, to lateral movement. It's almost inevitably going to involve Cobalt Strike at some point, just because that's the way the world seems to be at the moment. And so just make sure that your teams are completely familiar with all of these concepts and what might happen, and know how to actually observe and collect that information in a safe way, and know that when your environment gets destroyed, it's okay. Like that would be cool to have happen because you've designed it that way. Then I guess the other thing is we want to partner, and I think I'm going to just direct you to Engage, because we're a bank, and so it doesn't really make sense for us to be the center of deception here, but it makes way more sense for MITRE, who's got the Engage framework, and we're working directly with them on this stuff. And so reach out to Stan and Moretta if you're interested in this and figuring out how your organization can start running operations. And even if you're not at that point where you can run operations and you want to know how to get to that point, I think that's another reason to reach out and try to talk about what are the steps of maturity that we should be thinking about to get to this point. Because as a former FBI agent, an investigator, and an intel guy now at a bank, like this is some of the coolest stuff that we do. There's a lot of boring stuff that happens, especially in a bank. But on the intel side, running these kinds of operations and seeing how threat actors operate, it's really fun. It's really fun and exciting. It's one of the things that excites our whole team, and it's one of the things that we most look forward to every day, is trying to figure out what to do next.
I'm going to add on to that again, because they gave me a microphone, so I can. I think if you walk away from this talk thinking that your goal is to do adversary engagement, then we failed, right? And so I think what they were talking about throughout this is adversary engagement is your process. It's your way that you get to the goals you want to achieve for your organization, whether that's finding adversaries, having some effect on adversaries, learning something new about your adversaries. It's a tool in your toolbox. So like JR said, right, you're not necessarily going to go home and have these rigorous environments and do all these long-term operations as your first step, but maybe you can start thinking this way when you approach your security. And I think that's where you can start, even from sort of early on, starting to think deceptively and think about engagement as you're moving through. So I was going to add my part to that one. So Tony, because I kind of skipped over you there. What do you want the audience to take away from this, and sort of what are your if they were to do one thing when they get home, what is it?
Sure. I want to echo what JR and Stan said about the technical side, which again, we all know I can't speak to. I think what I would encourage everyone is, again, get to know your local FBI office and become friends with them. And I think what Miranda, what you were just saying now is have a plan, and hopefully the FBI can be part of that. But you kind of, as we say in the Midwest, you need to get your poop in a group before something happens. And you know, the FBI can help you talk through that and provide, whether you do engagement, you know, the deception environment or something else, but sort of have an idea of what you're going to do when the sky falls, basically.
Great. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to the audience. So we have a couple microphones. If you want to come up to a microphone and ask your questions, we will go right to it. So go ahead.
Actually, I have two questions. First one is for JR. At any time, how do you be sure your deception environment, your adversary engagement processes are working properly? Do you have manual tests or automatic controls?
Well, we have kind of live streaming analysis that takes place. So there's every packet is captured and analyzed, every event on the victim machines. So that is all live streamed to our analysis environment that we can watch in real time. So you know, we'll know based on the analysis of the malware where it should reach out to initially. So you know, we can check to see like, okay, oh, yep, yeah, we saw that. And then we can start watching the beaconing traffic in this environment, and you know, we'll watch it, and then sometimes we'll just see it turn off because the adversary goes, nah, this is fake, and they'll kill it. And you know, for us, we then will go back and maybe pull memory and things like that, and see what other things, what other artifacts we can examine to try to figure out what went wrong and how we can make it better next time. But yeah, that live analysis environment is kind of a key bit to ensure you have.
Second question for Matt and Stan for you. As MITRE Corporation, actually at the attack site, you have attack evaluations program for assessing XDR and EDR solutions, as you know. Are you planning to assess deception technologies coming soon, maybe?
Sure. So I think that there's a lot there, right? And so one of the big things with deception, and this goes to this whole seeing deception as a process, right? There is value, clearly, in being able to look at products and understand what do they do and what do they serve your needs. And actually, MITRE Ingenuity just did some deception evaluations for 2 different vendors. And I think there's value there, but I think from Engage's perspective, we are much more concerned with evaluating your implementation and your process of deception, right? How well did I take whatever my solution is, and whether that solution is the super subatomic honeypot on the blockchain, or your solution is some free canary tokens that you're using to put around some of your valuable documents, or fake users that you're putting on your network, right? We're much more concerned in enabling organizations to drive towards goals with their deception and with their adversary engagement, and less concerned about sort of what checkboxes a given product can have. And I think there's a place for both, but from Engage's perspective, it's much more about looking at how do teams actually implement this and how effectively it drives towards a goal.
I think this is what you're seeing here is given 2 MITRE people, you can have 2 different answers, right? So and from one MITRE person, you get 2 different answers. From MITRE Ingenuity, we actually just produced, and I think it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago that the results came out. Is that about right? Sounds about right. Go to MITRE Ingenuity and look up cyber deception evals, and absolutely important. And we have a different cognitive dissonance where we're just saying, let's look at the process. And I think we try and actually have a mosaic approach toward things. Some absolutely technical and how we evaluate those technical things, and some about how we actually change the mental model and how we educate that is, completely different, that can appeal to a different group of people. So yeah.
I think it also just goes to show, right, how vast this space is. There's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of questions that we need to be answered. And so we need folks who are thinking about different aspects of adversary engagement to come forward and sort of focus in on these different parts. And right, MITRE Engage, we have our focus. There's other folks focusing on other pieces, and there's a lot of problems. We need the engineers, we need the behavioral scientists, we need the researchers, the academics, to really kind of help this space. So there's a lot of places everyone can grab onto. Mary, person who came up that I don't know.
I have it's a question I think I'd love to hear from Tony and JR about. In the threat intel space and just sort of in cyber, we talk a lot about sharing and how important sharing is. And for organizations who have to sort of live that, maybe a little less JR it sounds like, legal and other things get in the way from sharing a lot of the details that you might want to share out to improve the cybersecurity posture of the whole sector, whatever, yada yada, right? So, have you found or run into or explored sharing technical details from adversary engagement and those operations? And is that an easier threshold to pass that sort of risk barometer of your legal teams? And then on Tony, on your side, I think as well that the FBI will do investigations. There's information you guys get, some of that's not shareable as well. And does it allow for improved sharing in more technical ways that would help organizations?
Okay, so I guess one of the reasons I think the financial sector is so mature in sharing is that we are regulated and mandated to share. So it's one of the checks that basically all governments do globally to see, are you sharing? Show us evidence that you're sharing. Show us who you're sharing with and what you're sharing. In the finance sector, we have a sharing mindset first, because I think the thought of cybersecurity is that there really are there's no competitors in cybersecurity, that we're all should be sharing to try to improve the landscape for all of us. Now, when it comes to adversary engagement, one of the complications I think with most organizations is if you have an incident and you have data from your own system, that does become complicated to share. But adversary engagement is something that, as the way we've defined it, it's something that runs outside our network. It's something that isn't, we know is not harmful to our organization because it's not on the production network. So everything that happens in there, we want to share out. So, my team in particular, we're really focused on what's happening outside the boundaries of HSBC, and then taking that knowledge and trying to share that with as many people as are interested. Over to you, Tony.
Sure. Again, I want to stress I'm not a cyber agent, so when things like this come up...
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little defensive about that. So we can often be too siloed within the FBI, so you're either CI or you're cyber, and we're trying to break some of those walls down. But if the CI side happens to have the relationship with the company and something does happen, we will bring in our cyber partners and they sort of run with this. So that's why I think the answer is it depends. We are, I've just said, limited on what we can share sometimes, either due to classification issues, or if we do get intelligence from a third company, we're not just going to start spreading that around. I mean, we do practice discretion. So there will be obviously limits on how much detail we can share, but and JR can speak to this from his bureau days, but there are things that we can tell a company, various indicators and things like that as things develop that we can provide. It's easier to do that again if we have the relationship. We can't really shotgun that out to the world. It doesn't really work that way. But if there is a relationship built, on some history and some trust built up, then we can do that. It's much easier. So I don't want to cop out on the answer, but I think it depends. But there are, if we're going to share anything, it kind of relies on a relationship existing.
So we only have 1 minute left, and I want to get to the last question. Before we get to that, I will say we're going to do a little coffee meetup down the street at Phil's. So if there are more questions than just yours that didn't have a chance to be asked or want to be asked in sort of a smaller venue, we invite you to join us at Phil's down the street for some coffee and conversations. But
It's
with that,
BYOC, buy your own coffee.
yes, it is buy your own coffee. We are a nonprofit after all. So go right ahead.
Have you seen your adversaries mature in the speed
I'll start. So the good news is there is a continuum of adversaries, right? And I think that's the great thing is some adversaries get outed in these big reports and they sort of disappear and they change up. We have seen some adversaries who are now bugging out, right? They figure out this is not what they want. It doesn't appear to be where they should be, so they just leave. We have seen people doing more checks. You'll see, it's interesting, we've had a lot more luck with virtual machines in the last couple years, right? Prior to COVID, or the word we don't say anymore, right? No actors wanted to run in a virtual machine because virtual machines are where people do malware emulation. But now the whole world is virtualized, right? We're moving to cloud, we're working to off-prem. So we've seen some adversaries who are much more okay with that. And so there is a change in some of those behaviors. I think so yes, we've seen some changes. Ransomware moves fast. There's a number of things you can read, like from 0 to encrypted drive in 2 hours or 7 minutes or whatever. So I think it's a continuum. We've seen a lot of different things for some people. Some of these actors just seem to they get paid by the hour and not by the success. So
And I think there's a value proposition either way, right? If every time our adversary lands somewhere, they have to ask the question, is this real? Is this piece of data real? There is a value proposition to forcing them to ask that question.
Yeah.
You want to add something, Jerry? Yeah.
I don't. I feel like you guys have covered it. Yeah, because we continue to see people try and try again, and it's when we re-engage the same adversary, if we haven't changed things significantly enough, they are faster to figure out. Okay, this is very similar to what I saw before. I'm not going to waste my time with this. We actually, with one adversary in particular, we re-engaged them on purpose again and again and again, and then they blocked our IP space. Which was hilarious, and so I mean that kind of ended up with the effect that we were hoping. So there's no wrong way. Oh, there is plenty of wrong ways. But when you're running these things, you can learn a lot by doing a lot of diverse different things. And I think there's probably just not enough data yet to figure out the maturity of threat actors knowing about deceptive environments and how they're reacting to those things. And that's one reason why we need more people thinking about this problem. And trying to engage in this type of activity.
Can I just chime in with one more thing? I think this is why more people need to do this, because people are going to figure out. Yeah, but you did it your way, we do it our way. We need more people to do it different ways.
Oh, okay.
More people to do it different ways.
So if you're interested in being one of those people, please come talk to us, right? Like you have public folks like these guys who are up on stage talking about it. We have partners who will never talk about, who are in the private sector running these things. So if you are anywhere in that spectrum, I think we'd love to chat and figure out how do we do stuff together and how do we really impose cost across the industries and across different sectors. So with that, I know we're over time. So I'm going to thank our panelists, thank all of you, thanks those who asked questions, and please come talk to us.